Well, I think there's some very serious questions that the Premier needs to answer here, Neil. How is it that a close personal friend of the Premier, someone who owns a racehorse with the Premier, so no ordinary business leader, he's a mate, and the personal relationship goes to the point of owning a racehorse with this person. So the Premier owns a racehorse with him, he's a friend of him. Mr McKenna's been linked and associated with Liberal Party fundraising, and suddenly he receives a $1.5 million grant. And of course this comes hot on the heels.
But are you saying that businessmen who are friends of the Premier shouldn't be eligible for government grants?
No, not at all, Neil, but where there are conflicts of interest, they need to be declared, they need to be managed. The Premier made this announcement and said it was good news for Mr Colin McKenna and good news for his meat
But who
works.
made the decision?
Well, that's the real question. That's the real question.
It wasn't the Premier.
Well, how do we know that? If the Premier had no involvement in this, Neil, then he perhaps ought to come onto your program and he should explain to the people of Victoria how he had no involvement in this. There are some very serious matters here, Neil, because it comes hot on the heels of last week where the Premier completely inappropriately was throwing his weight around trying to do a favour for another friend, Robbie Waterhouse, trying to interfere in the independent processes of Racing Victoria to get his bookmaker friend Robbie Waterhouse a special spot at the Warrnambool Carnival.
Well, the Premier has said already that he has had nothing to do with this decision. If that's the case, there's no problem.
Well, I don't think it's a matter, given the Premier so spectacularly failed to understand how independent processes should work last week with Robbie Waterhouse. I don't think we ought simply be taking the Premier's word for the, even though I know the guy, even though I own a racehorse with him, even though he's connected to Liberal Party fundraising, even though I made the announcement, even though I never said that I had any of these relationships with him, don't worry, trust me, it's all fine.
So
That's not good enough. Well, I'm going to be writing to the Anti-Corruption Commission later on today, Neil, and I'm going to be asking them to have a full and close look at this. They should investigate this. The Premier simply cannot be handing out $1.5 million of taxpayers' money to a close personal friend, someone he owns a racehorse with, someone connected to Liberal Party fundraising. That is not appropriate in any sense. There are very serious questions, Neil. In any sense, there's very serious questions and they need to be answered.
So you will ask the Anti-Corruption Commission to investigate the Premier?
I'll ask the Anti-Corruption Commission to investigate the awarding of this grant to not any ordinary business person, but to a business leader who the Premier is a close personal friend of and with whom the Premier owns a racehorse.